This is 24 in 42. All right, welcome to 24 and 42, the pod video cast, vlog or blog on a video, however you want to call it, where we get to learn about the life, universe, and everything of a particular author. And today it is Bob Byrne, who I had the pleasure of working with on a really cool book that he is the brainchild behind, actually. Yep, we get that. And I will be floating the picture up on the screen as well. Uh, Bob actually put this series called Hither Came Conan together on Black Gate, where he blogs on a lot of topics. And over time and my getting involved in the Howard world, I really liked that. I really wanted like a permanent collection of it. And then Howard Andrew Jones and Bill Ward had an ongoing conversation about the Howard stories. So when I was lucky enough to meet Bob at Howard Days, I said, "Hey, what do you think about putting these two together?" And the next thing you know, we got this massive tome that is literally the best gathering of information on Howard's original Conan stories that exists, and we get to claim it together. So Bob, but you write far more than that. Tell us what you write and how you came to writing.
So I wanted to start. I love the 24 and 42 because I blogged about Douglas Adams at Blackgate several times. I have made up my own entries in the Encyclopedia Galactica and in the Hitchhiker's Guide to follow that humor.
Yep.
And while I love Hitchhikers, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency is literally one of my 5 favorite novels.
Awesome.
I absolutely love Dirk Gently. And I listened to the BBC radio play of that and then of The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul, which I think is one of the best book titles I've ever run across.
I agree.
Several times a month, and I fall asleep to it at night sometimes because sadly I'm sleeping alone. But regardless, so 24 and 42 is awesome because Douglas Adams and Pratchett to me are the ones that make me laugh out loud.
Yep.
So I think that's great.
Thank you. I love it. It's definitely done on purpose. So
I picked that up right away, and it fits the U, so that's good. I'm mostly known as a blogger at blackgate.com, which is a World Fantasy Award-winning website, because I do nothing normal. And people who know me, and you've met me, I emailed John O'Neill because I'd just been a commenter. I said, "Hey, you need a mystery column," because that's what people do at World Fantasy Award-winning websites is write mystery columns.
Yep.
And John wants content because he doesn't pay any of us as well. And John, I'm kidding. I keep getting through the firewall, so they haven't got rid of me yet.
The bushels of potatoes are always good every year, right? Yeah.
And he said, sure. And he said, how about weekly? And I was thinking once a month. I've not blogged. I wrote for a magazine, in Britain once, but so I have been doing a Monday morning column with a few breaks for 10 years now.
Yep.
And he can't contain me in mystery, as we know, because I did Hither Came Conan. I did Discovering Robert E. Howard, where again I gather the beauty of writing a column is if you get other people to write it for you, then you are really getting your blogging down. Right. And the Howard community, more than the Sherlock Holmes community, which I'm really active in, more than Solar Ponds, people love sharing their thoughts and writing about Howard and his stuff. So between Discovering Robert E. Howard and Hither Came Conan, I mean, I got so many cool people involved that I didn't even know when it started.
Okay.
I met you through all this stuff. So that was really fantastic.
That's sort of sad to hear about those other worlds, that they're not as sharing.
I've got a half dozen Sherlock Holmes short stories published, which I was going to mention. And I've been in the Holmes. I have a free online Sherlock Holmes newsletter because I am a geek among all geeks. That community got so toxic 2010, 2012, I don't remember when, but it simply did. That's what got me into Robert E. Howard. I hadn't even read the Conan stories at that point in my life, even though I'd done fantasy since middle school. And I bought the first of the Conan Del Reys, and behind me over here, down a little, are my Del Reys on my Conan shelf. I have all those. And I just absolutely got caught up in Robert E. Howard. And I love El Borak as much as I love Conan. I like Solomon Kane. I've blogged about a couple different Howard things at Blackgate. So the Howard community, other than when people decide they're in the mood to argue about El Sprague de Camp, as you know,
Yep.
which even at the Howard days I went to 2 years ago when we were in one of the meeting rooms, I know,
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, we're arguing over de Camp. All of you just sit down.
Yep.
But nonetheless, the Howard community and the Conan community, but the Howard community, there's none of that. I mean, almost literally. And the Holmes, I still have a whole bunch of friends in the Sherlock Holmes world, and I still do stuff in that. But man, it got rough, and that's not part of the Howard thing, and I love that. It's fun. I mean, it's enjoyable because of that.
It is. It's like a big family reunion most of the time. There's always the people that want to argue about something.
I was saying, and we don't always talk to uncle this or cousin that, but yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So I've written some fiction, I've written some nonfiction. I write introductions for Steger Books, which is just a dream for me because I love hard-boiled and pulp. I do a summer pulp column every year, and same thing. I get William Patrick Maynard, and I get William Patrick Murray, and I get Frank Schildiner, and I get all these people to help write columns on stuff because I don't know everything about everything. I mostly know hard-boiled. Okay. I'm still trying to get the farmer people to write me one. I jump on Christopher Paul Carey every time I see him at a summer conference. He's like, yeah, we'll get something in there for you. Fine, Chris. So I get to do that in the summer at Blackgate, but I get to write the Steger intros, which is great because I get to write about Hammett, and I get to write about Norbert Davis, and I just did Paul Kane and stuff. I get to write about stuff I like, that's about as good as it can get.
Right, exactly. You got a podium to stand on and convince other people to be as enthusiastic as yourself. You bring in your mystery background into Conan, the God in the Bowl. Obviously, you've really analyzed that a couple times, but
I was of the wow, that's a crappy story. Now, no, as we learned in Hither Came Conan, no story is completely crappy. A witch shall be born. We've had discussions. Valley of Lost Women. They're. But I went and I looked at it, and I think Neil Finn had done this before me, or Mark Finn, sorry, or maybe it was Neil Baker. I think it was Neil Baker, but I looked at it as a police procedural one of the times I was reading it, and I'm a huge fan of Tony Hillerman's Navajo tribal police procedurals, Leaphorn and Chi, and there was an AMC series recently. Great stuff, just fantastic. I'm like, this is actually a pretty good police procedural before the term even existed. There was no such thing as a police procedural. There'd been Victorian books and there'd been hard-boiled cop, but there was not a police procedural. And Howard wrote one. Yeah. So I'm like, well, that's something I guess I hadn't seen anybody writing about it, but it fit my bailiwick. So I did that. And fortunately, you included that in Hither Came Conan.
Of course. Yeah.
As a police procedural, that's a pretty interesting story, and I'm looking to do another essay on partially on justice in the system then, because there's some good guys and some bad guys on the cop side in that, but expediency and catching somebody and having somebody to hang out to dry kind of gets the upper hand on justice. And look, they're dealing with that in the fantasy world in the Hyborian age, and that's in current stories and that's in current real life. Right. So I'm like, there's Howard's plugged into this.
Not too much new under the sun.
No, not much. I know. There's a character in that story. He's very, very much like a Nero Wolfe character who's a highway patrolman, and I'm the biggest Nero Wolfe fan in the world. We'll talk about that a little. But I've got a half an essay, 2/3 of an essay that pulls each out of their stories and compares them. So you've got Howard and Rex Stout, who didn't really have anything to do with each other in any way other than they were popular authors in the 30s and on in the case of but I can find pieces of both those. So I love digging into Howard. I'll do Nero Wolfe and Sherlock Holmes and all that stuff all day, but I keep digging into Howard, like The God in the Bowl, which again is, The God in the Bowl. Yeah, that's one of the early stories. No, there's a lot more to that one than a lot of people think.
There is. It's not high on my recommendation list, but to really know Conan, it is definitely a component of his character. So.
Yeah, it's let's see, Tower of the Elephant and Rogues in the House and God in the Book. No, that's just, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. But if you like it, which we do, and then you're like, all right, I'm gonna appreciate this. And I'm sure there's other stories that are more like that I haven't got into. And Iron Shadows, what was that? Shadows in the Moonlight.
There's both. I don't even remember which one is
I know
really.
I'm blanking out, but there are a lot of biblical references in
Oh
that
yeah.
and comparisons to God sending Jesus, and I think that might be in Hither Cam Conan.
Yeah.
No, I wrote a separate essay on that, but I used the Dark Horse comic as the
Okay.
basis for that. And again, if you want to look for stuff in Howard, and without getting all, you can find stuff in Howard that makes stuff even more interesting than just, hey, this was a good story and this
Yep.
was pretty cool. So I a latecomer to Howard as I am, I just wrote an essay this past summer in my pulp series on Swords of Sharazar. And I was
but I
digging
haven't read it.
into Kirby O'Donnell. And I'm like, this stuff is just great. I love this.
All right. So contrary to what we've done, it is not a Howard hour. We are going to talk about Bob.
Most people would rather talk about Howard than Bob, but yes, that's perfectly fine.
No, I just realized that we should have titled this show "What About Bob?"
Oh God, and that is one of my favorite movies because not Bill Murray, Richard Dreyfuss steals that
it.
movie.
Yeah,
absolutely steals it.
All right.
On to the questions.
So, for anyone tuning in for the first time, I asked 24 questions. Our goal is to answer them in 42 minutes. I give the authors 16 of the questions in advance, mostly so that they don't have to hem and haw and think about their answers. And then there's 8 of them that are a little bit more tongue-in-cheek that they answer unknown during the query session.
On the fly.
Yes, sir. All right, so I am going to start our timer here, and we are going to begin with, what color do you write in?
What color do I write in? Okay, that is clearly not one of the questions you sent me ahead of time.
It is not.
What color? I don't even know what that means, Jason.
Well, some people take me really literally, and they only give black and white, and I'm waiting for, I have yet to have someone pull a Howard. He wrote in hues of purples and greens and passion.
That would
yeah.
In blogging, which is different than writing novels and short stories, which I've done some short stories and I've got a couple novels which I'll mention that I'm working on. To me, the color I'm writing in is engagement. And one of the things John O'Neill, who's our boss at Blackgate, says is, he goes, you write stuff because you want people to want to talk to you about it. And you want people to be interested in it. So I'm trying to bring out, I could bitch about the horrible Dirk Gently BBC miniseries a couple years ago. I blogged at that at Blackgate. I do less than probably 2 negative columns a year for 52 weeks. That was one of them that year. But I'd rather talk about Dirk Gently, and I'd rather talk about Hitchhikers, and I'd rather talk about. I just did Death in Paradise for my post this week, which is a BBC British cop show, police procedural.
Okay.
That's set in a Caribbean French island. So it's a complete fish out of water thing with a geeky British DCI in the Caribbean and the local Caribbean culture, which is not British, as I think we all know. But I love this show. It's been on for 12 years. There's 100-something episodes. They just had a Christmas.
Where did Bob go?
Yeah.
Bob gets a little animated when he's talking.
That is the essence of Bob right there. Am I in the middle? That's me right there.
Good thing you had undergarments on.
Yes, I am wearing pants. You work long enough, you wear pants. I think we all know that. There I am on the monitor. I write in a hue that I want people to engage and be interested. And not everything I write about is interesting the same way not everything I talk about is interesting. But I love when I get a comment that somebody either went and checked something out. I have turned people on to pulp series before, old pulp series, which I love that. I mean, go read Norbert Davis, or, everybody knows Dashiell Hammett and everybody knows. But I write about T.T. Flynn and his horse race bookie, who's basically a private eye, but he's not. He's a horse racing bookie in the 30s.
We can feel your passion through your words, and passion ignites people. So you got to go to your right.
I know this thing is driving me crazy. I've got a camera that's a camera, and that is pretty much the extent of it.
All right. There we go.
Am I in the camera?
Well, nose down you are. Now we cut off your eyes. There you go.
But, and it hangs. Oh, there it is. That's the part I was missing. Thank you.
Perfect. Look at that.
Clipped. So I mean, my hue or my color, it's engagement. I mean, I've told John that I'll write a post and I'll get no comments. I'm like, man,
Oh,
I spent however many hours doing it, laid it out,
I
writing
know.
it. I promote it on Facebook where I try to be active. And I've told John, I said, when you're pissed at me, you go in and delete comments from my stuff just so I don't have it. You don't you? And John gives me the grin and goes, yeah, that's what I thought. But I I don't feel like I failed when I don't get a comment. But I much prefer to get one or two and have some kind of conversation in there.
Right.
And sometimes it'll be 20 or 30. Like when I talked about Glenn Cook or when I did
Yep.
Tolkien.
Yep.
And now you got people that are talking about stuff in an interesting way. That's stuff that you like. And I mean, man, that's about as good as blogging is going to get, I think.
Yes, a running conversation is pretty cool.
Yep.
All right, let's get to you. City or country kid, and wherever it was, did you grow up playing your adventures by yourself or with some friends?
So I have lived all but 10 years of my life here in Columbus, Ohio, where I still am, and I'm old. I was down in Austin, Texas, your way for a few years. I'm a city kid. I grew up in Columbus. I went to college and grad school in Columbus. We used to go outside, and I've got a teenage son who's 17. And it's a very different growing up world now than it was with me. I would play in the street and we'd play wiffle ball and I'd be outside until dinner.
Yep.
And then we'd go out again until sunset. And I know in the country it's the same kind of thing, but that's how we did in our neighborhoods. We played wiffle ball all the time and we went up and down the block. We'd get walkie-talkies and go play hide and seek.
Cool.
You know, within a range of like 5 houses as it worked out with our cheap walkie-talkies. But you know, I was part of a small D&D group. I learned how to play D&D in maybe 6th, 5th, 7th grade, something like that.
Okay.
But mostly we just played outside in the neighborhood. And that's how I grew up. And it was very different for my son growing up, even though we grew up in it. I mean, we had a house in a neighborhood and
Right.
same thing. So I'm a neighborhood city kid that was outdoors playing with my friends.
That's the way to do it. I'm glad you were able to do that. Hey, if
Me
you
too.
stumbled across the yellow brick road, would you follow it?
Flying monkeys. You know what? Since I can't stand hobbits, yes, I would probably do that instead of a road that led me to hobbits. So much as I love Tolkien, I'd rather run into the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man than I would Tom Bombadil.
Instead of
The
hanging
hate
around Munchkin
comments you're
Land?
going to get on this broadcast or our podcast are already starting, but there are a couple things about Tolkien I'm not into, and that's 2 of them. So I think I'd follow it and see what happened.
So when you're writing, fiction and nonfiction, it doesn't matter unless it's different. What assails your ears?
So when I'm writing, I reread my dialogue over and over, and I write Sherlock Holmes, and I write Nero Wolfe, and I write Solar Ponds, who's very much like Sherlock Holmes, just a Edwardian era. And I've got stories for all of them. And I'm writing a style that obviously I'm emulating Dr. Watson, and I'm emulating Archie Goodwin, and I'm emulating Dr. Parker. So, I mean, if I'm doing that wrong, then, I mean, I'm not really writing the character to begin with. So if you set that aside, man, when I read and I reread, and then I just hit something that's bad dialogue, it's like a clank to me. And I might have written it and I thought it was fine, and I go on, and then I hit something and I'm like, good God, that's not how it sounds. And there's a writer I like that refuses to use contractions.
Okay.
And man, you want to talk about clunky?
Yeah.
Just constantly will not. Constantly. Oh God, now I'm out of contractions. But it's all of them, one after another. And I'm like, just say won't. That's all you got to do. But it literally pulls me out of reading. And when I'm rereading my stuff, it's painful to me to find clunky. And sometimes I play my little mind game, and I'll write it and I'll think, I'm emphasizing this point by saying will not.
Yes.
And then I rewrite it and I'm like, man, that sounds completely idiotic and wrong. And I'll say won't. And then I read it in context. And I'm like, okay, that's how a real person would talk.
Right.
So I don't mind adverbs. Stephen King, tough luck. Norbert Davis used adverbs because he got paid by the word. So you can't get through 2 paragraphs without an ly in there. But man, when I read my own bad dialogue, it's just a sore thumb, stop sign neon glaring. And it still gets in, and it's there, but I try and go over it, and that's what I'm looking for. It's not so much plot stuff, and it's not wordiness, because I am wordy. But man, I hit it. It's just like hitting that brick wall with the car for me.
Can you hold yourself to read it when it's all done, or do you read it as you're doing it? allowed.
Yeah, it's funny because being a blogger, I always say that, an award-winning blogger, if I can add that. But in some ways, blogging is kind of like pulp writing, because I got to do 1,000 words a week, and I'm basically doing it 1 to 2 sessions every week, plus whatever else I'm doing.
Yep.
So I crank through stuff when I'm blogging. Now, I'm not just. I know people who read my Blackgate column think I'm just winging this stuff, and no, I'm actually working on it. I'm trying hard. But I'm getting it done. When I'm writing short stories, like I'm working on some Nero Wolfe stuff, I tend to go over that chapter I'm in a couple times before I move on.
Okay.
I don't outline as much as I should, and I need to. And I would get through a lot of my stumbling blocks on plot if I outlined, there's no doubt. But because I'm writing and flowing, I'll still hit a point while I'm in that chapter and go, all right, let's go back and see how you kind of got to that point. And it's funny because I don't catch the dialogue as much when I'm doing that because I just wrote it 10 minutes ago or whatever it is. And that's how it's flowing.
Yep.
But, I'll reread before I finish, clearly, that there's the polish and but I mean, I'll go back to it to get where I'm pushing my plot along. And I'll start to see stuff jumping out that like, boy, you were just moving along right then, weren't you? And it's not crap, but that's not really the best it could be. And it's almost always dialogue. It's not the emulating the atmosphere that Conan Doyle set up or that Rex Stout set up. I like reading that stuff. I don't know if everybody does, but I do. So I like describing the elevator coming down and Archie saying, no elevator ever worked harder than one bringing Nero Wolfe down from the plant rooms. I mean, that stuff, it describes what's going on. Right. But again, I read dialogue and I'm like, ugh. So I kind of go along as I go along.
It's a challenge writing in a world that's so built like that. Yes, exactly.
In some ways that's easier. The artist thing. Well, in some way, it's laid out there, but I want to do it well.
Yes.
And my Sherlock Holmes stuff's not as good as my Nero Wolfe stuff. I've had some stories published and I try hard. Man, I've read some people that shouldn't be writing Sherlock Holmes at all that still have whether it's self-published or in books. And, that doesn't sound like Holmes or Doyle. You're doing your thing and that's fine. But I'm trying to emulate that they are and do it at least as well as they did while still trying to bring something into it because if all I'm doing is giving you another story, that's nice, but.
Right. You didn't need to throw those names on it then. Right.
I have had the best compliment I think I've had on my writing is a couple of people have told me, and I'm active on Facebook in the Nero Wolfe group, that they've read stuff I posted because I like to post some of my stuff. They thought it was Stout's. Oh. They thought it was what Rex Stout had written. And
that's a good compliment.
I mean, I'm grinning right now just remembering that. Yeah. There's nothing higher praise for me than to write as well as he did, at least for bits of it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really good recognition. All right. Moving along here.
Yep.
Your 3 favorite reads as a youth.
So I had to go look up one of them.
That's fine.
See, what number was that? I'm looking.
I rearranged the order, so
yes, I'm getting there. Yeah. Quote nonfiction. So there is a book. It's one of the first books I actually remember reading when I was younger, and it had to be grade school. It's called The Westing Game, and it's a mystery story for kids. But it's not Encyclopedia Brown, which is actually my second favorite, and that led me to the Hardy Boys. But it was sort of an award-winning kids children's novel. And I still remember that as like the first book I ever really liked.
Do you have an author on that at all?
Hang on one sec. Westing Game. And it's been around a long time and it's known. The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin.
Okay. Oh, all right. I know that author name.
And it's a mystery book, won the Newbery Medal for year's most distinguished contribution to children's literature. But I remember getting it from my library in grade school and it still sticks with me.
Stuck with you. All right. And it led you to Encyclopedia Brown, which I
Encyclopedia Brown and the Hardy Boys. I read all that. And that helped feed me into being the mystery person that I am. I got to tell you, in middle school, I discovered Elrica Melnibone.
Okay.
And those DAW covers by Michael Whelan. Okay, this little geeky D&D playing kid and those DAW covers. Man, I loved Elric. And I got into Tolkien a year or two later, and I'm more now an epic fantasy guy than a sword and sorcery guy, which Howard Andrew Jones still dismisses me and makes fun of me over. Like, I know I'm a newbie to sword and sorcery, but I'm getting my feet in there. I'm trying, Howard. Elric, it went on in Fortress of the Pearl and all the stuff that got out there in the Skraeling tree. It really wasn't my bag.
Did you get into Zelazny, Amber, like Howard likes?
Okay, do not stop this now and kick me off. I've still never read Zelazny.
Oh, that's yeah. There's a ton I'm learning from these interviews that I have to read.
Well, there are a lot of people in the fantasy sword and sorcery Blackgate world that I tell them I haven't read Zelazny, and I'm like, well, you haven't read Solar Ponds. That's apparently not the same thing at all. I've discovered.
No.
Oh no, and I like Corum. I like Hawkmoon. I've got there's an entire shelf up top of Moorcock stuff here. And I got to know him on Facebook some, which was cool before he ran into something and got kicked off his own page, which is ridiculous.
Yes.
Yep. And he is big into Carol John Daly. I don't know if you know him. He basically wrote the first Hardboiled Private Eye stories. Hammett came right after, and Hammett did it way better. Okay. But he wrote he basically took the American West cowboy, stuck him in the city, poorly wrote him. His Race Williams stories, I can't read more than one at a time without taking a break, but they were hugely popular in the pulp Black Mask field.
Okay.
And one of the first times I connected with Moorcock, he said, yeah, I just finished rereading Race Williams. I love those stories. You know, I didn't immediately go, but it wasn't what I expected from Michael Moorcock.
Yeah,
I got to tell you that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I spent a good 3 seasons in a row trying to convince him to write a Blackgate post for me in my summer pulp series on, is it Edmund Hamilton or Donald Hamilton, the sci-fi guy? I think it's Donald Hamilton. He's one of the classics, and I'm more fancy than sci-fi.
I thought it was Edmund Hamilton.
Yeah. Edmund, and Moorcock's a huge fan. Yeah. And we chatted about it. He just told me, he was too busy and he was getting on in years and he couldn't do what he was doing. But I tried really hard to get him to write an Edmund Hamilton thing for my pulp series, which I would have loved.
That would have been really cool. I would really hope that they can get him out to Howard Days one more time before he's no longer with us.
I know his health has been bad, and you probably talked to some of the folks even at Howard Days, same thing that and Windy City, some of the folks. He's hanging in there at least.
Right.
I just got the newest book like a month ago, and it's on my list of things to read.
Okay. All right.
But so that was I had mystery, and man, Elric and my D&D geekiness, and Lieber didn't age for me. I have tried to revisit Fafhrd Grey Mouser a couple times, and I even did last year by audiobook, and I don't know what it is. I don't dislike it, but I'm not that interested in it anymore.
I appreciate his storytelling. I think his stories are fun, but I get tired about a halfway to 2/3 of the way through of his humor. Right, it doesn't work for me. I feel like if it was cut in half and the whole story spread out, it'd be great. But by the time you get to that level, it's just too much.
Have you read Paul Kemp's Eagle and Nix books?
One. I have the other
Man.
two. Yeah. No, I
like those more than Lieber. Yeah. He is as the way, to me, Dennis L. McKiernan is as close to Tolkien as we're ever going to get anybody writing an homage that's legitimately good and not a knockoff.
Okay.
That to me is Kemp with Eagle and Nix. That is as good Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, I think. And I know some folks are writing it now, and one of my Blackgate buddies is going to be beating me over the head for this. But I think that's as Fafhrd and Grey Mouser as somebody is going to write. Same thing. I just thought those books were really good. I read either 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 4.
Okay. I thought there was only 3, but because I just ordered number 3 because I realized I never had it. I never got it.
I read 2 of 3. He went off on not being happy with the state of the political world during COVID and what was going on, and said, I'm taking a break from writing because I'm focusing on more important things, and he's not come back yet. That's what I've read a lot.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to see him come back with a 4th. I mean, assuming I read the 3rd, but I like those Kemp books. I really do.
It'd be good if Stover came back too. But anyway, we're getting off track here.
Yep.
New question. What was, and maybe still is, your favorite cartoon, and when and where did you watch it?
The key is not to immediately recite the last thing I watched, because I was watching a run of Crapopolis last night, which is ancient world low humor. My favorite cartoon, it's not the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, because I tried that again last year. Man, that it's great what it was, but that did not age. I'm gonna throw out Duckman, which not a lot not a lot of folks have seen, and it is hard to find. So I don't know if it's actually my favorite, but I know I always enjoy watching Duckman.
Yeah.
And not George Costanza, I forgot his real life name. They couldn't have had a better character or voice for that character. Oh, but I did finally watch Archer last year from start to finish. I had not watched Archer.
Okay.
That's a fantastic cartoon. It's adult, but that is a great cartoon.
Definitely is.
There was an entire season that was an homage to Tales from the Gold Monkey, which is one of my favorite Lost show. So I was a happy camper.
I only watched the first season of Archer, but
it's a lot of the same all the way through, just so you know, but it is what it is.
What do you think the best money is you have ever spent on your personal writing career?
So yeah, I know I answered that one.
Yeah. There's a wide range of answers I've been getting, and they're all been interesting.
Oh, I'm sure. Lawrence Block is a really popular author. He's a Hugo Award-winning author. He's been around a long time now. And he wrote the Matt Scudder books, which are hard-boiled private eye type things about an alcoholic ex-cop. They recently did a movie a few years ago with Liam Neeson, which I wish they'd done a couple more.
Yeah.
But back in the day, he used to write for Writer's Digest when all of us actually subscribed to Writer's Digest, in the 70s.
Right.
And got a copy. And he collected, he's done it several times, but the first one was a collection of his Writer's Digest essays, and it was called Telling Lies for Fun and Profit.
Okay.
And it is by far the most refreshing, encouraging thing that I go back and revisit. And again, it's columns, it's essays.
Yep.
The next one, which was called Spider Spin Me a Web, it's good. There were more, but it's one I revisit. And if I remember correctly, Sue Grafton, who's a huge mystery author, she did the A is for Alibi, B is for. She wrote the intro to one of the editions and basically said the same thing. When she's just not feeling whatever she's not feeling, that's what she pulls off the shelf.
Okay.
And I got
those digest book, those advice books. Yep.
Yeah, and they're his, but there's also a guy named William Bernhardt who he's a New York Times bestselling author, writes legal thrillers.
Yep.
He's got a series. They're small books. They've got colorful covers, and they're called the Red Sneaker Writer series.
Okay, I've seen them.
And they're fun. Any. I'm sorry?
I've seen them, but I've never read any.
They're short. They're engaging. There's a little writer. There's an intro quote. Then it covers the subject, or each chapter's on something like the story structure book. I posted a couple of Blackgate columns where he gave me permission. I outlined them top to bottom, the books myself, and he let me post them. They're really good. They're fun. They're helpful. He's got little writing exercises at the end. He's a super cool guy and a fun guy. And he quotes John D. MacDonald and he quotes Faust. He's just got all this stuff. But dialogue and plot and one on the hero's journey and story structure is by far the best one. And compelling characters. They're really helpful and they're useful and they're easy to read, which that's really the whole combo you're looking for in the book. Because some of them, even when they're helpful and useful, you're like, oh God, I'm really pushing myself to read through the rest of this.
Exactly.
And I've got books on screenwriting, and screenwriting could just put you into a coma trying to get through some of those. But between Block's book and those Bernhardt books, they're good. They're helpful. I like them. I read them for fun, which that's not normal, but I like it.
But it helps, and then you retain it. So when you're doing your own writing, do you think it makes it more challenging or somewhat easier if you feel emotion strongly?
That was the toughest question to answer out of the ones you sent me. That was interesting. That was, I didn't even know what to think of that one at first. I think I went for, again, partly because of the way I deal with in blogging. I want emotions. I want engagement. I was trying to think if I didn't shoot for the emotions and if I was just writing, I don't know what that would be like. That was odd. So I think it's easier to be immersed in it. I don't know. I guess maybe some people just get so into that and that moment and that thing that I guess since I don't know, but I don't know how it would be harder to be that kind of engaged in it for me. I mean, I don't finish what I don't finish, whether I'm super emotionally tied into it or not. I've got other reasons I don't get stuff done. I assume that's some people, that's their problem.
Right. Yeah.
But I would think it'd be easier for me anyways.
I think you're very emotional person to begin with, so I think it's
Yeah.
part and parcel to your writing. So,
Thank you. It's been said. Yes. The emotional part. Yes.
titles. Do you find them challenging or easy, and where do you usually come up with them, at the beginning or the end of your work?
I wanted to quote what I wrote, but I'm like, man, I wish the writing came as easy as the titles do. Plotting is the hardest part for me, which is probably not the smartest thing for somebody who wants to be a mystery writer. I could probably get through fantasy easier than that, but by not plotting mysteries.
Right.
Oh man, titles! I'm telling you. Even when you told us you were putting together the stuff, you're like, I need everybody to title their essays for the Hither Came Conan book, because obviously I just did Rogues in the House, Bob Byrne, or Mark Finn, whatever the story was.
Right.
So I think I had like 5 titles to you in half a day, or the first time I sat down, I'm like, and you picked one obviously right away. But no, titles, I get them early. And I like to toss out a title and then I keep thinking of better ones as I go.
Yep.
But writing mysteries, I don't want to say titles are more important, but the title should be tied into something you're trying to do with the plot and the story. Again, I don't always do that. I grabbed Hither Came Conan because I think if you remember when I started the series, it was the best Conan story, or was the best of, was it the best of Conan or the best Conan? Because that was the idea behind it.
Right.
But then I was reading that intro, because who doesn't go back and read that intro all the time?
Yep.
Oh man, Hither Came Conan, and everybody's got their essay on the story.
Right. Yeah.
And that flow.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, to me, I'm a huge John D. MacDonald fan. Howard is my second favorite author. John D. MacDonald is my favorite writer in any genre. I think he was brilliant. And those whole Travis McGee things that all had a color in the title, and they usually had an adjective, the bright orange shroud and the fearful lemon. Oh man, that's just brilliant. So titles come to me easier than the stories and the plots do, which I don't know if that's the case for other people, but that's not the best setup you want. You would prefer the other parts to come easier.
Well, to come easier, but a lot of people struggle with titles. So I've written things just based on having a title. I can write a whole story based on my title I came up with.
Oh, I don't think I could write a story without a title.
I have a spreadsheet filled with titles, and I almost have every one of them assigned to a character in my head. I just need to write them all.
That's the part of it. I got ideas here. I got Bloggate posts at Blackgate for the next 8 years, but I'd have to sit down and write every one of them.
All right.
Good.
What's your timeline like from the initial idea, any research required, and some of the stuff you write, probably you got to get into that world and that atmosphere till you say, okay, this is good, I'm done, final draft, I'm submitting it?
That was probably the most sort of non-fit question for me, since I blog mostly and I only write short stories. I've worked on a couple novels. I'm working on a Sherlock Holmes novel that's based on a real life crime in San Francisco that I also started a good 12 years ago. So at some point I'm going to have to write it. Yeah. I blocked it out. I love research, by the way, like many of us do. Man, I've got books on William Randolph Hearst and San Francisco and Boss Roofs and the Barbary Coast. And yeah, that's all great that I know all that stuff. Let me tell you, it comes in really useful. Since my short stories are mysteries, to me, I have to jump in and try and figure out some kind of ending that isn't bad, or that they're just like, wow, that was it, huh? So plotting is my Achilles heel, or as I like to say, at least my Paris elbow.
But you have to, it's always struck me as challenging in a mystery. You got to at least what I've been taught, you have to give the reader the slim chance of solving it. So that means you got to lay a few crumbs along the way.
Fair play.
Yeah.
You have to have fair play. You've seen the movie The Usual Suspects?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, that's one of my favorite twist at the end movies.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And somebody told me once, because we were talking about it, and No Way Out is sort of my second favorite like that with Kevin Costner, but on Unusual Suspects, somebody told me, they gave that away at a certain point. And I'm like, no, nope. I said no. And they pointed out a scene to me, and I went back and watched it, and I was just devastated because I'd missed it. And I'm not going to ruin it for people.
Okay, yeah.
But there is something that if you look at it and you see it, you think about it the way someone explained it to me. Maybe I'll email you on the side if you want. You could have guessed it was him. And legitimately. Now, it's in a scene and things are going on and you're not just doing that, but it's there and it's fair play.
Okay.
And I don't know if it would have taken away at the end, because you probably didn't think about it till you went, oh, that's right.
Right.
but it's there. And I still didn't get it when I watched this movie 10 times and it's my favorite suspense thriller. That's that fair play concept.
Yep.
Most of us can't pull it off that way. And I read mysteries. One of my favorite series is A Hard Boiled by Raoul Whitfield. And it's about a Manila detective named Joe Garr. And he doesn't fair play. And I blogged about it at Blackgate this year. And you can't solve most of them because he'll bring in a guy that wasn't in it on the third to last page. And he came into the cabin and did this on the boat. And it's what he does.
I'd be throwing those books across the room.
I know it's kind of a hard-boiled Hercule Poirot, and I love it. And I talked about my Blackgate. I'm like, I recognize this for what it is, and I accept it. There aren't many of those that I can cite that I continue to read.
Okay.
So you're absolutely right. In a mystery, if you don't lay down a couple of pieces at least that gives them a chance to figure out, even if they're looking back at what's going on,
right,
you're really not doing what you need to do for the reader. I mean, your story may work, and you got to where you wanted to go, but honestly, my thought is, jackass.
Yep,
that's what I'm thinking to the writer.
Exactly.
I shouldn't, but so it's fair, and that's the concept of fair play.
Okay.
And sometimes you see it so heavy-handed, you're like, oh my God, you want to talk about a red herring? Really? I mean, do I even have to read through so that's the harder part of writing the mystery right there. So my timeline, I do love the research, but I'm usually working on a short story if it's not a blog thing. And I'm just trying to work out a plot. And once I've got the plot worked out, I can write.
Yep. All right. So when you're done writing, calling it a day, are you wiped out, exhausted, ready for a hot bath and a good drink? Or are you so pumped up you got to get out of the house and do something?
And doing the blog, again, I'm doing, sometimes it's 1,000, sometimes it's 2,000 words. I'm doing it every weekend. I generally try and start on Friday night because I have no life, but we know that. Look at me. Or I do it on Saturday and then into Sunday. And when I'm done, I'm tired because John makes us, upload and put in our pictures and format and do all that. So I'm tired. When I can write a short story, I'm kind of excited. Like when I finish a Sherlock Holmes short story, I know it's good enough to send off. I'm 57. My partying days are long past me.
But you're happy. You're upbeat.
I am. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I got it done. I like it. Ideally, well enough. I also know that, again, I've still got 1,000 words due on Monday, so that's already in my head. But for me, I would read 10 hours a day if I could. And funny you mentioned about a hot soak. 1 hour in a tub in the hottest water I can make it as it's filling up with a book is literally my time out from the world. It is my Bob. I'm not looking at my phone and I'm not watching football. And ideally it's a book I like. I mean, it would be. And man, it is a total time out from the world. So I like that feeling. And that's part of when I get my reading in sometimes. But sometimes when I'm done writing, especially if I finish my Blackgate stuff, I either go play Fortnite because then I get to go shoot people and kill people. And I'm happy getting that out of my system. I read. And that's kind of what I like to do. And obviously I'm kind of a loner in that regard, but I'm more online social than I am in real life now.
I don't know. You were running around talking to everybody at Howard Days. But I want to point out, I usually don't reveal when we're recording these things, but since you're wearing the wrong team's top there and our games are playing tonight.
No, I am not reading that. My ex-wife is a UT grad. And yeah, I'm aware they're playing tonight. Yes. I wore this specifically because it's the game tonight, not because of you. And may I say, UT fans are so much more chill than Ohio State fans. Because I grew up here in Columbus. They need to chill here. I know that. I'm older now, so I'm not the same, but just it's a football game.
Take it down.
And, relax and quit writing about Ohio State in your obituaries, honestly. And I'm not kidding you. So living in Austin for a couple years, I enjoyed the vibe around UT. It was good. Nonetheless, I think the Buckeyes are going to win by 16 or 18.
Whatever. All right.
Yeah, whatever.
So now this is a little bit different, this question for you. Because you write in worlds mostly that other people created. Have you created a world? And if you have, would you live in any world you've created?
I thought about that in the sense of stuff I like to read.
Okay.
And fantasy stuff. And thought more and more about it. And I've read a lot of high fantasy. I've read a lot of sword and sorcery. And no, I don't want to live in those worlds, honestly. And I'm sure if I was writing, a hard-boiled Detroit in the 30s. No,
Yep,
not
so
really.
no.
I mean, honestly, if you
Right.
think about that,
Right.
I Middle Earth, I just rewatched the extended editions a couple weeks or a month ago. That's not the greatest, funnest place on earth. You watch those movies, read the Silmarillion, and that thanks to you, I did that Glenn Cook interview,
Yep.
which
Cool.
was one of the best things I did last year. I was absolutely thrilled. Man, the Black Company world is not any place I ever want to be in other than a book in front of me. And as much as I love the Garrett books even more, Ton Fair is not, and Antwerp are not the places I want to wake up every day. So honestly, even I'm a huge Catherine Kurtz fan. I think she's massively underappreciated and kind of forgotten. But in medieval world and magic, I don't think anybody did that better than Catherine Kurtz during any series. Man, that's a bleak time to be alive in Gwynedd. And so I am probably one of the biggest Thieves World fans you're ever going to run into, even among our anniversary crowd. Man, you couldn't pay me to spend a day in Sanctuary. I'd be dead. But
okay, Bob, I have to advise you. We have just hit the halfway in questions and 34 minutes, so we got to get a little bit more.
You knew getting me. This is me, Jason, but I'll work on it.
If I invited you to my writing workshop that I hold once a month, you got 30 seconds to give one piece of writing advice to my audience. What would you say?
You absolutely have to write about something you enjoy or you're interested in. And I've tried to write sword and sorcery, and I'm not good at it. So I'm interested in it and I enjoy it, but it's not my thing. If I was trying to write about something that I wasn't into, there's no way. I don't think you could. You'd produce something, but it wouldn't at all be what you're capable of at all.
All right. Good point.
So whether it's mystery or fantasy or Nero Wolfe in my case, who I'd rather write Nero Wolfe than anything in the world. Look, we all do our jobs, not you. Most of us that have our 9-to-5 jobs, our jobs are what we do to work. And we're not always that in. I'm a budget analyst for the government. It's fine. I do what I do. Man, the fire I feel when I write versus that.
Oh, yeah.
Not even remotely close.
So I would hope so. Although I do know an accountant that loves her work. My wife.
I'm a budget guy, so I deal with fake numbers. That's a whole different world. So I think you really, and you've seen my blog posts. You've got to engage with what you're writing, or I don't think you're going to satisfy yourself, honestly.
That's true. That's very true. So what do you think is the most difficult thing you have ever personally written?
Because I'm stupid, I decided I was going to learn how to write a screenplay. Because who doesn't want to write a screenplay? I don't know. So I'm big into the Civil War, and especially the Battle of the Merrimack, the Monitor and the Merrimack, which is the first battle of the Ironclads in Hampton Roads. And I've got a Civil War shelf in the other room. So I decided that's a great story. And I was going to buy a bunch of screenwriting books, and I bought Final Draft software, and I taught myself how to write a screenplay. And man, it is the biggest piece of crap. It follows the format of a screenplay, but it's terrible. But you know what? I taught myself how to do it, and I finished it.
Did writing that, though, help your action scenes? I've always been told that if you can screenwrite, your action scenes are better.
If you can screenwrite well, your action scenes will be better. But I can tell you, John Gardner wrote The Return of Moriarty, which is my favorite Holmes pastiche in the 70s.
All right. And
I ended up writing a pilot episode for a TV show for that. And I did a series guide, and I pitched it to him via email back in the day. Because I had taught myself how to do a screenplay at that terrible Civil War novel, which, by the way, is a great story. The Monitor and the Merrimack's amazing from start to finish. I just don't know how to write a screenplay about it. This wasn't horrible. Wasn't great, wasn't horrible, but he read it. He liked it some. Didn't happen. He and I stayed email friends until he died some years later because he's a great guy. John Gardner was a super nice guy. He wrote the Bond novels for several years. That was one of his gigs.
Okay.
So, but I taught myself how to do that, and it was hard. But it came in useful, and I got better at it.
Right.
And what I wrote for the Moriarty, which I talked about at Blackgate as well, is much better. Still not good enough, but better than what I did with the Iron and Thunder. What a great name for the screenplay.
Put it on the shelf next to Blood and Thunder. All right.
But,
sporting choices. I'm going to throw 3 choices out to you, and you got to pick one. Swimming pool or shooting pool?
Oh, man, I hate swimming. Shooting pool.
Okay. Tennis court or basketball court?
If you've seen me shoot free throws even when I was in grade school, I'm not good at tennis, but we'll go with tennis court.
Okay. And driving range or target range?
I have never shot a gun, and if it doesn't involve a windmill and a magic mountain, it's not real golf. So honestly, you could pick either one of those for me.
So target range could be bow and arrow too, or even throwing axes.
I have thrown axes at a church men's retreat, and I've done a little bow and arrow with my son. So all right, we'll go with shooting range.
All right.
Target range. Yeah.
All right. Do you have a favorite quote, poem, lyric, and will you share it?
Yep. Yes, I will. So it is the epitaph on Jackie Robinson's gravestone is a life is only important in the impact it has on others. It is one of the most profound things I've ever heard. It's part of what I try and engage when I blog, which is kind of what I was talking about.
Okay.
Jackie Robinson's my idol. But that quote applies to your family life, your friends, your jobs, your social media, writing, everything.
Yep.
You'd put together a book called Robert E. Howard Changed My Life, which you did not invite me to be a part of, but that's fine. You've got me here now. You didn't know me then.
I can supposed to be 13 essays and it's 36.
But it's me. Obviously, my reputation was not so big in the Howard world, but that is literally a book. That is the book personification of that Jackie Robinson quote, his tombstone. I mean, that is it. So I think that never fails. And I screw up my life, and I'm a dad, and I've made mistakes, and I've screwed up at work, and we have impacts we don't always like.
Yep.
But the impacts we make matter, and whether it's good or bad. And you and I did Hither King Conan because we wanted to have a guide to the Conan books that's going to last, I think, forever. I don't think there will ever be as definitive a guide, because who's going to put in all the work that we got everybody else to put in to put that together so we can do that?
Who needs to? I don't think there's a thing missing from that.
Nope. No, I don't either. So
we shall go down in history. All right.
Yes.
10 first thoughts. I'm going to throw out a single word and you respond.
Oh, fun.
Song.
Song. Wow, you actually froze my brain. Oh my gosh. Just Be Held by Casting Crowns. Okay. Wow.
Foam.
Foam?
Yep.
Bath.
Envelope.
I don't drink, so no beer. That's why it's bath. Envelope. Tongue cut.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Still, at my age. I'm not kidding you.
Well, that's going to sort of feed into the next one. Irritation.
Ex-wife. Okay, sorry. She'll never see this. Go ahead.
Hat.
Hat?
Yes, sir.
Dodgers cap.
Blue.
Dodgers cap.
Snail.
Disgusting.
Giddy.
Me.
Dawn.
Dish soap.
And clue.
Don't have one.
I love it. All right. Nonfiction titles. Do you enjoy reading nonfiction? And share with us some of your recent titles or recommended titles.
So I mentioned I've got a pretty good Civil War shelf, and it specializes in the Battle of Hampton Roads. I got a lot on that.
All right.
And I read true crime, mostly for mystery story plots, Victorian 30s, 40s. So I read a lot of that. But again, going with my geekiness, since I was an undergrad in poli-sci a long time ago, I had been a total wonk for the Constitutional Convention of 1787 in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I will tell you, I have got a shelfie on that and related items that I almost guarantee is better than your local libraries. That is one of my areas. I've actually included that in one of my Bloggate or Blackgate posts for shelfies. I revisit that topic every so often. I wish I had more time for it. Catherine Drinker Bowen's Miracle in Philadelphia. I read it in college. I've reread it since then. I even have a board game that I've got no one to play with me yet, where you're at the convention and you try and put together a constitution and get delegates behind you and stuff. Again, no one has played this with me yet. But I am a complete wonk for the Constitutional Convention of 1787.
That is definitely a new one. Okay.
Yep, that's me.
What visual artists have work that just moves you, that just makes you go, wow?
In the fantasy field, I mentioned Whelan. I know. I'm just saying. I mentioned Whelan. I've seen a couple of those original paintings at Doug Ellis's house, and I just stood there with my jaw open looking at him because wow.
Yeah.
I like some Frazetta, but not as much as everyone does, but I like a few of them. I like Walter Velez's covers of the early Thieves World paperbacks from Ace. I think
All right.
And Doug's got a couple of those too. Wish Doug would leave me some stuff.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mystery Field. So Adrian Conan Doyle was Arthur Conan Doyle's son, and the sons were lazy bums that lived on their father's money and kept everybody out of homes and everything. And I've written about that at Blackgate. But he wrote some short stories, partly with John Dixon Carr, and they're home stories, and they're actually good, and I like them. And they appeared in Collier's magazine. And there's a guy named Robert Fawcett, who I didn't know otherwise, but he did some watercolor painting illustrations for those. And they're among my favorite Sherlock Holmes picks, even though they're not for the Doyle stories. And they can stand with Sidney Paget and Frederick Dorr Steele, who are the legendary Sherlock Holmes illustrators.
Interesting.
These Robert Fawcett Colliers, and you can Fawcett, and you can put them in Google and type Robert Fawcett Holmes.
Okay.
And they'll come up. But man, they're deep and they're detailed, and they look like they should be hanging in a Gothic mansion. And it's just Collier's, magazine things.
Yeah.
These works of art, man, they're good, and they've remained my favorite.
Very cool. I love looking these up when I don't recognize them. So, how do you give depth to a character when you're writing?
Okay, that one I actually got to look at, because that was an interesting question.
And then secondary is, do you treat first, second, and third level characters differently?
Again, mostly writing short stories,
Right.
as opposed to, the blogging. One thing I try and do is I consciously try to catch myself when I'm using a secondary, especially a tertiary character, just as an info dump. And I think in mysteries more than fantasy, you get that more and you see it. We're like, oh, I need to give this. I don't need one person to come in and do that and then go away. And that's the only reason they kind of existed. And I do it. And there's no doubt I do it. And I either try and find something that gives them some depth, some personality, something, so they're not just an info dump. More often, I don't need them for that if I've got other people around that I can use it for.
Yep.
And that's why in movies, not everybody goes from the book to the movie.
Yep.
Now, movie adaptations often mess up the book. We all agree with that. But sometimes stuff gets left out of the movie because it doesn't need to be there while it's in the book.
Right.
Tom Bombadil in my case, but regardless. So Max Latin is a character by Norbert Davis, one of my favorite pulp guys. And the first story he did, he's got depth to a half dozen characters in that first story. And it just floors me every time I read it and listen to it, because there's more than this much in all of them.
Yeah.
Going through the main ones and the backups. And it's literally what I look at, like, people can do this. You can write and get that.
Yep.
And I literally listen to the audiobook every month several times.
Really?
Gently.
Dang.
And he did it. And not every story's like that, but he's good at that. So I try and give him some kind of personality without making him some flat cliche, because that's the easy thing to do, obviously.
Right.
Oh, he sneezes every time he walks in a room. Wow, that really added to it, didn't it?
Yeah.
But you look at Sherlock Holmes, and he's a bunch of these personalities that work for a reason. And Nero Wolfe is exactly the same. So to me, it's not just having them do something, because if they don't do something more than do something, and especially info dumps, which again I'm bad at with mystery stories. You get a monologue at the end, and man, I just start to sleep. And even the good mystery writers can do that. So it's that. It's more than just having them do something or give you some wording or something, because that's weak and it's bad
and predictable.
I try not to.
Yep. So, of your own characters, I don't think I'm going to allow you to say Sherlock Holmes or any of the non-Bob characters. Of your own characters, who would you like to hang out with?
It's funny because the two characters I've written a couple stories about otherwise, just for me, are basically an alternative to Sherlock Holmes. And I've got a hard-boiled private eye set in Columbus, because you're right where you are.
Right.
That I wrote about Alan Casper. And when I first started writing him, and this is a long time ago, I haven't finished any of the stories, but I've done some. Man, if there was a cliche, I think I had it with him. And over the years, I've paired it back to where, okay, this is actually a character. He's not just Bogart, who's my favorite actor of all time, but he's also not like, the dame had legs that went all the way up to the ceiling. So I got all that crap cut out. But he's a hardworking private eye in Prohibition era Columbus.
Okay.
And he gets tied up in a political scandal. And he mostly does what's right, but he's also kind of wanting to get the bad guy, however it is. So he's actually someone he's not me, but he's somebody I'd kind of like to hang around with while he's trying to solve a case.
Okay. See, I like that thought. And then that leads right into, who do you think writes the best characters that you like reading?
Rex Stout, Nero Wolfe, and Archie Goodwin. As much as I've done stuff in the Sherlock Holmes world, and I own www.solarponds.com. I have the only Solar Ponds website in the world, and Ponds is August Derleth's successor to Sherlock Holmes. Yeah. As much as I'm into Ponds, I love Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin, and I love the A&E TV series. That's what got me into it. I have written several short stories. I actually aspire to be the next official writer of Nero Wolfe, and I've actually talked with some people in that area that are related to that.
Cool.
So I love Stout's characters. I love the brownstone. I love how they interact. If you talk to people who like Nero Wolfe, the plots are fine. The plots ain't why you get into Nero Wolfe. It's the characters and the interactions and the setting.
Yep. I'm a character reader, so that's why I asked this. A lot of my questions are about characters. And so I want to know the ones that move you and you're excited to read. So.
I spent a couple years. Howard made the mistake once, Andrew Jones, of asking me about Nero Wolfe. And again, I've got a free online Nero Wolfe newsletter. Again, when I geek big. I always have. So I kept bugging Howard to read it. I think he finally got a couple from the library and did. But man, I will espouse Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin and Inspector Kramer and Saul and Fred and Ori. And I've got Blackgate posts about him that you can find by typing Nero Wolfe. I have written I'll save that for the 3 C's actually, maybe. But I have written more words about Nero Wolfe probably than anybody who is not officially a Nero Wolfe person, both fiction and nonfiction. And I'm not done. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I don't want to pursue this, but I'm going to say I could do that to you with, have you heard about Stephen Erickson and the Malazan Book of the Fallen?
So I am up to Toll of, I can't say Toll of the Hounds. You know how there are words in life that no matter how old you get, you can't say right? I cannot believe Toll is one of them for me. It's freaking 4 letters and 2 are the same. But anyways, I've got a master's degree, for God's sakes. I got up to Toll of the Hounds. I can only do a Malazan book once every however often. They're bleak, and I don't do bleak and rough well.
Okay.
But I've gotten to that point. I like them. I actually like S. Lamont's first series set in that world. I've read the first 3 of those, and he doesn't write the same way, and there's not as much depth, but I like the ones he did that started. So I thought, I'm not reading these. I'm getting older, clearly, and things are going. So I got Toll of the Hounds, and the next book is audiobooks through Audible, and that's another thing. I have gotten to stuff in Audible that I never have time to read or reread. So I'm all in on audiobooks.
Okay. All right.
I did Howard's not this series, previous series in audiobook because I managed to fit it in. It was like 47 hours for the Toll of the Hounds on audiobook. I am not kidding. It was such a number. I listened to like the first hour and I went, there's no way I can do this. Because I listen when I drive, I listen while I work, I listen. Yeah. I cannot do a 47-hour audiobook. So I am going to finish Malazan because I really like it. And this is one that involved the Anamunda Rake and stuff who I'm kind of into.
Yeah. And that's a very important book. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
I cannot do 2 books of 95 hours of Malazan. That's just not going to happen listening to audiobooks. So I'm with you on Malazan. I think it's an amazing series.
We got 2 questions left. Yep. This one is, now you've done this, so you're going to have to really scratch. If you could write anyone else's character from any medium that you haven't written, who would it be?
So I'm not going to hit you with Nero Wolfe, and I'm not going to hit you with Sherlock Holmes, although you're not going to let me. But I want, knowing that I was going to cover it in other questions, I knew I was going to play fair.
Okay. Yeah.
So Dashiell Hammett and Frederick Nebel are the first 2 names on my hard-boiled Mount Rushmore, and the third name is Norbert Davis. So he was a black masker and a dime detective pollster, and he could write straight hard-boiled, but he was actually the master at the time of comedy hard-boiled stuff, not Dumb and Dumber, but funny hard-boiled.
Okay.
And that didn't really fit in as much back in the 30s and 40s. I mean, he had a niche, but that wasn't quite the niche. Man, I told you about the Max Latin stories. I actually am working on a Max Latin short story that Matt Steger is, at Steger, Matt Mooring at Steger Books it knows I'm working on. And if I get it worked out and everything, it might end up being the main story in one of the future Black Mask issues, which I've had a nonfiction essay in Black Mask. So me as a pulpster in Black Mask is just, I mean, really. If I could have a story of Norbert Davis's Max Latin in there, and I don't think, I mean, I'm getting there, but I emulate that same thing. I got to emulate that voice of the characters in the stories. But while I'm writing Wolf and Pons and Sherlock Holmes, man, I love writing Max Latin. I'm having so much fun with this one story, which I'm still trying to plot out. That's where I'm stuck. But Norbert Davis, I can't recommend him enough. He doesn't get nearly enough love, and he's pretty much forgotten. And I'm writing Davis intros for Steger because Matt knows I'm the guy for Norbert Davis for him. He wrote 3-4 novels about a kind of sloppy, ethically questionable private eye and a Great Dane. And the Great Dane is the brains behind it. So it's kind of a Pulp Turner and Hooch, if you want to think of that.
Okay.
But that's what he's best known for, and they're fun reads. I mean, they're private eye stories, but this
especially in that time, in the 30s and 40s. Holy cow.
I know. Davis was if I remember, he committed suicide when he was about 42.
Okay.
One of my neatest things is related to him. So John D. MacDonald, my favorite author, right? He wrote the intro to the Max Latin short story collection, and it was the last thing that MacDonald wrote before he died. He got cancer and died. Man, he was in a cranky, bad mood when he wrote it. It is the most unflattering, damning intro to theoretically a collection of stories that you like because you're writing the intro.
Right.
He basically said that maybe if he hadn't sold out and tried to make a living in the slicks, he wouldn't have killed himself. I'm not kidding you. And this is my favorite author writing this. So Matt reissued the stories. And I said, you ever want a new intro to that? I'll write it. I got to write an intro it's pro Norbert Davis, but I got to write an intro that replaced my favorite author's intro.
Wow.
And that is for, again, I do this when I'm all excited. You know that. But
Giddy.
I replaced John D. MacDonald had sold 600 million copies of everything when he died. And he's still one of the great names of the mystery field. I got to replace John D. MacDonald's stuff. Man, that's going to stick with me.
That's a great feather. All right, last question.
Last question.
Are you trying to share anything in your writing?
Ooh, that's one on the list. Honestly, the William Bernhardt books, premise and theme are two of the things. And you know what? Those are things I get least. I'm going to be honest. I'm not great at theme and I'm not great at premise, and I kind of get the concepts. So honestly, stuff's supposed to be not so much. I'm trying to write a story that makes sense. Yeah. I'm trying to write, whether it's mystery or generally something else. No, I mean, I probably, if I ever got to the novel stage and, did that level of everything, I'd probably try and dig deper into a theme.
Well, you did say earlier that, like O'Neill told you, write to engage, and you've been trying to do that and everything. So there's that.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to stimulate your reader in one of two ways, emotionally or intellectually. If you can pull off both, that's a guaranteed winner. But engaging your reader is a target.
That's absolutely. I mean, that's clearly mine. And ideally, they read my Sherlock Holmes short story and go, "That wasn't bad." Again, that's why I said when they told me that they thought they were reading Rex Stout, holy shit!
Yeah,
wow,
great compliment.
Wow. And somebody told me no. I told him no, that's mine. And I mean, obviously, what I'm writing, it's not from one of the stories. It's my thing. Right. And they said, "No, that can't be you." And I'm like, "No, that's me. No, that's." So I took during COVID. We all dealt with COVID, right? The way we dealt with COVID. I went through a divorce that year. I switched jobs. A lot of days, the pandemic was like the fourth biggest thing in my world to deal with.
Yikes.
2020, man. I'm glad that's long over. I started every day. I would write at lunchtime and then at home. If Archie Goodwin was living with Nero Wolfe, but in today's COVID world, so things were getting close and stuff was getting down. And I basically had Archie write like it was his daily journal of COVID.
Okay.
I did that for 40 something days. I wrote over 40,000 words of Archie
Wow.
Goodwin and the Brownstone. And I was posting it every day that night in the Facebook group. That's what really got me in as a writer of the Nero Wolfe stuff.
Okay.
And people, again, were reading it and going, what is this? Where's this from? And stuff. And I'm like, this is me. This is how I think Archie's trying to go with living one of the biggest pain in the asses in the world, locked in a brownstone during a lockdown in the world. That ain't easy. And I did that. I actually handed out a printed copy of it. They let me at the Nero Wolfe gathering we had last summer, and I got to give out a copy to people. And a couple of people asked me to autograph. And again, this stuff doesn't happen to me. I have not been, at Howard days when this book was out. So the idea that somebody asked me to sign something is like, really cool.
Yeah, I know.
So I really enjoyed engaging, and my way of dealing with divorce and not seeing my son and COVID and changing jobs was I dug in and shared with the Nero Wolfe community what we were all feeling as Archie. And that's probably the deepest thing I've ever done, and it was one of the most satisfying.
And it probably totally expanded your repertoire as a writer. It really, 40 days of that, you got some feathers down. Yeah.
I finally burned out, and I took a day off, and I took 4 days off, and then I wrote like 8 more days, and then I said, okay, you've done what you've made to do. But yeah, I was sitting every day and separated, from my wife and my ex-wife, and man, I wrote. And I don't think I'd have got through COVID if I hadn't been writing the Nero Wolfe stuff, honestly.
Okay. Well, that was a redeeming thing, and that was an emotional writing, too.
That absolutely was for me.
All righty, sir. This is where you get to tell us something cold in your world that you would like a little bit more light shown on and maybe somebody read.
Cold. So I've got half that Sherlock Holmes novel I mentioned. It's based on a real life U.S. murder. I've got some background info on it. William Randolph Hearst is actually a character in it. Boy, that dude was larger than life. I knew who he was, but that was it. But I read some bios of him. Man, he's entertaining. That's all there is to that. So that's a case of me sitting down. I've got a half dozen short stories published in David Markham's MX book of new Sherlock Holmes stories. It went on for over 50 volumes, I think. And I got in several of them because he liked my stuff too. And I wrote them. I need to finish that novel. I need to sit down, and I've got most of it. I've got it plotted out, and I've written 25,000 words. I can write a Holmes novel. I don't know if I can write a Wolfe novel. I can't write a fantasy novel. I can write a Sherlock Holmes novel. I just need to do it.
Okay. All right.
So that's current, man. I blog a couple thousand words a week, as you know, at Blackgate.
Yeah.
In 2024, I did a couple of multiple post series on Doyle and Stephen Hawkinsmith's Amazing Holmes on the Range series, which is a Sherlock Holmes kind of overlay on Old West mysteries, which I love. I've got all kinds of ideas for Blackgate. I've talked with you. I've talked with everybody I know on them. I have recruited for a Solomon Kane version of Hither Came Conan a couple of times so far. It hasn't fit my life and my thing.
Okay.
And Dr. Fred Adams and some of the people in Discovering Robert E. Howard and in Hither Came Conan have told me, dude, I'm in. However you're assigning Solomon Kane stories, I'm in. So I would like to do Flintlocks and Sabers or something like that, or Flintlocks and Rapiers. So that's in the coming, I hope, someday.
Okay.
I actually had some people lined up for one of those multi-contributor series on John D. MacDonald, where they were going to pick their favorite MacDonald book or short story and write. COVID hit.
Life happens. Yep.
That was the end of that.
Yep.
One that I really want to do, and I keep coming around to it. I've got other people from my Facebook world that are into this. Pick your favorite Columbo episode. And even if you and I have the same favorite one, your view is going to be different than mine. It's not like Hither Came Conan. And as long as I can do a week by week of people talking about Columbo with some things for me involved, because man, Columbo and Monk, because Monk's kind of like Columbo. Man, Columbo never tires for me. He's Columbo's Columbo, man. And I've got a couple of well-known authors,
okay,
not in the fantasy field outside, that want to write about Columbo because my God, they love Columbo. So I've got in the coming, if I will continue to do a weekly column for Blackgate until John again fixes the firewall.
Right.
He's tried, let me tell you, but I keep getting around it. But I've got ideas that are more than just my weekly favorite thing, and I'm trying. And Solomon Kane's one of them.
All right.
And
So
the one though, I have written I have written part of a series on the first 10 to 15 Roy Thomas Marvel Conan comics where I really dig in, and
okay.
I pull from those 3 memoirs he wrote.
Yep.
And I've got all 3 of those, and I pull in what I know of the Howard stuff. So I've written a couple, like the one on the Gray God passes. I'm really pleased with what I wrote in this one. I mean,
Okay.
I don't always like what I did. I'm like you. Sometimes you're like, that was, I got it done and that was okay, but that's a good one. That is going to be a Blackgate series, and I've got the Marvel omnibuses they did. So if I don't tear them apart on my scanner, that's going to be a pretty cool series, I think, going through 10 to 15 Roy Thomas
Right.
with his insights on it, plus stuff about Howard, and then piecing through them. Because honestly, if I had nothing else I'd do, I'd go through all 100 that he wrote and tie back and stuff. So that is absolutely in my coming for Blackgate if I can get it.
Excellent. Excellent. Any more Holmes short stories coming up for you?
That series is the MX series is wrapping up. And I think I did 6, which is pretty good for me. So it's probably going to be doing the Holmes novel. But again, I aspire to be the next Rex Stout. Robert Goldsboro is in his 80s and probably won't be writing them, forever after. Yeah. And Bob Byrne. That's how I see Nero Wolfe if I can make this happen. So that's what I plan on ideally in my future.
That is super exciting to hear. And Bob, this has been great. We have covered a ton of topics. I totally
you and I
you.
are two of a kind that, like you said. All right, I don't want to talk about Malazan, but I'm going to talk about Malazan. this is what my blog posts are. It's engaging in stuff that we both like, or I'm interested in that catches your eye. Yep. Or you say something that I don't know, and I'm like, really? That's honestly, if that didn't work, I don't know that I'd keep blogging at Blackgate.
And that's the whole purpose behind this. I wanted a conversational tone, get what moves you, but also perk interest from our watchers. So hopefully you threw out enough things there. And this is not sword and sorcery specific. I'm covering all grounds. Yeah. So I appreciate your mystery input. But
did I run longer than Mark Finn?
Probably.
Most? Mark and I are both of like-minded talkers, as you know, so, and rather like you, rather similar to sartorial hairstyle, shall we say.
So I'm going to say the end of the show punchline. Thank you very much for letting us get to know your life, universe, and everything. My thanks to Bob for kicking Season 2 of 24 in 42 off. Lots of names are cited and crazy hijinks occur in this hour plus of getting to know Bob's life, universe, and everything. It's a remarkable conversation, as every conversation with Bob is. I will be eternally grateful Bob hit upon the grand idea of the Hither Came Conan series, and that we were able to work with Howard Andrew Jones and Bill Ward to bring that award-winning combined collection to print. Check out all of Bob's other writing and drop some comments on his Blackgate posts. Until next time, this was 24 in 42.